It's rivalry week. Miami Hurricanes hosting Florida State. Is this going to be a routine dub for the Canes, or will the Seminoles have something to say?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Got a crossover here, Miami and Florida State. Shout out to the everydayers for making this Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode, you're watching and listening to us both on Locked On Seminoles and on Locked On Canes. We will give our predictions for this Saturday, 7 p.m. at Hard Rock Stadium. Key matchups to watch. We'll talk about the rivalry factor. We'll talk about the midseason grades for these teams and where they stand so far. He is Brian Smith, who's not only the recruiting overlord here on the Locked On Network, but host of Locked On Seminoles. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. And Brian, first and foremost, I think everyone knows who's going to be starting at quarterback for Miami, but is there any question or any quarterback controversy between Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhoek for this week?
I say yes, but we both know that no matter the school, the coaches are going to avoid that like leprosy. Okay, they're not going to talk about it. But I mean, Brock had 3 consecutive plays with the turnover last week. That's hard to do, Alex. That is really hard to do. So Luke came in, he got the short end of the stick, kind of like Brock did on some drops, but you know, he's not anywhere ready. He's not processing fast enough yet, and he shouldn't be. He's 6-7 games into his freshman season in Tallahassee. So they're in a bad spot either way. I would expect both to play and Brock to start, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot of word salad out of Mike Norvell at his press conference.
Yeah, no doubt. And those coaches are alike in that regard because you don't always get a whole lot of clarity either.
he's one of the worst in the country. There's no doubt.
Especially when it comes to injury info. But Miami did, a couple games ago see the return of Ruben Bain, and then last game against Louisville did see the return of Jalen Rivers. So those things eventually did happen. Obviously in Miami's case, arguably the most stable quarterback situation in the entire country. Cam Ward has himself in the Heisman conversation. He's actually, Brian, all 7 games as a Miami Hurricane has thrown for at least 300 yards in each game so far this season. And I know I was looking at the Pro Football Focus grades. You take those with a grain of salt, of course, but they actually gave Ward like his 3rd lowest grade of the season against Louisville. I actually thought, Brian, that was probably Ward's best game because you got the good with none of the bad. He committed 0 turnovers against Louisville while throwing for 319 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I was actually surprised they didn't grade him more highly than they did.
You got me. I'm always a little iffy with the grading. It's hard because there's so much subjectivity to it. But I watched the majority of that game. He, as you said, he didn't take many chances. He had the one throw, like he threw back to the middle or whatever and got away with it. Something.
Yeah.
But his arm strength and his ability to throw from angles opens the door and closes it at the same time, depending on when it is. Some of those guys over at the Cover 3 pod call it whoopsie daisy passes. Every now and then he had like the underhand one or whatever. He does some of that crazy stuff, but he's so adept at making the play in the moment. You got to live with it because how many touchdowns has Cam created because he does things outside the box? That's not coachable. So even if his grade was 3rd lowest and you come up with 50 some points, I guess thumbs up is kind of how I would look at it. I wouldn't worry much about that.
Yeah, and Ward is the big reason why, because we'll talk here about what's been working so far this year for Miami, what has been working for Florida State, and the big thing for Miami that's been working is the offense. Number 1 in total offense, number 1 passing offense in the country, and it seems like the running game is now coming along. They were lagging behind a little bit first 5 games of the year. This past weekend against Louisville, 219 team rushing yards. Mark Fletcher started, and he did fumble. Outside of that, had a nice day. And Damian Martinez actually, as the 2nd running back, had his best game of the season for Miami. Had a hard-nosed 30-yard touchdown to seal the game. Had a couple of angry runs in that one. So, I can only grade Miami's offense an A plus, Brian, and obviously the defensive side has been a far different story. But before we get to what hasn't been working for Miami, I know you may be grasping at some straws here after a 1-6 start, but is there anything you would say has been working for Florida State? Anything that the Seminoles can build on?
Well, there's a couple of things that are ironic, like their running game going into this prior contest against Duke was literally dead last in the nation, 134. But they ran for 160 yards. Sack adjusted average is like 5.6 or something like that. Duke's defense against the run's not great, but they bludgeoned them pretty good with the freshman quarterback. So maybe they figured out something. They put a couple different guys in the lineup at different spots at guard. They still had some ugly moments, but that would be the interesting part because Miami's D-line, as you know, is not lacking for physical skill or experience. So I'm curious to see if they can get that going. And their screen game to the running backs can be explosive. The second play of the game against Duke, Tofili took one down inside the red zone. He's very elusive, but he's got great hands. Those are the things they're good at, but they're basic. Anything where they get behind the sticks, they struggle, and that's reality. And that's why their offense is quite honestly one of the worst in college football.
But I do have to wonder if Florida State's offense, that the highlight in points this year was actually the opening game of the season when they scored 21 points in Dublin. They have not equaled that total since. But could this be the slump buster for Florida State's offense going up against Miami's defense, who started the season against lesser opposition? I guess I'll include Florida in that. Florida's been better lately, but Miami first 4 games of the year, the defense looked overall fine, but against Virginia Tech and against Cal and against Louisville. Now, Louisville's got a good offense, but Miami's defense, coverage busts galore, giving up big plays, chunk plays, a lot of confusion, questionable tackling. The defensive backfield at times, Brian, just really looks lost. I know this past Saturday was probably an especially rough game for Jaden Harris and Diani Hill. I mean, even when coverages aren't being missed, some critical pass interference and defensive holding penalties have been taking place in extending drives. And so, yeah, it's been problematic the past few weeks. And really, it's just been a tale of two sides of the football. I mean, a top offense in America and a defense that has forced the offense to play in a lot of shootouts. That's what's been an issue for Miami as of late. Now, you mentioned Miami's defensive line. That's honestly been the saving grace, Brian, that the D-line has been good. Simeon Barrow, the transfer defensive tackle from Michigan State, I think has been the best defensive player on the team so far this year.
He's nasty. He's nasty.
Ruben Bain has been back for 2 games and has played very well since his return from injury. So the defensive line, bails out the rest of the defense from time to time. But the D has not been ever present for Miami. Now for Florida State, how much time do you have? But I mean, what has especially been problematic for the Seminoles so far?
Third down defense. This is one of the weirdest combinations. They got some of the best pass rushers in the country. Their pass rate or pass rush efficiency is high. They've been in the top 20, like tackles for loss and sacks and stuff like that. But the problem now has become other teams are like, well, you guys can rush the passer, so we know you're not going to score much. And they're right. They just run the ball, 0 turnovers. Like Florida State is, I think, 129th in the nation in turnovers created. They've created 3 because teams are just super conservative because they don't have to score. I mean, it sounds just dumb, but because of that, Florida State creates sacks when you do pass, but you're always in manageable third downs and the defense gets wore down, and then their third down percentage gets annihilated, even though they're good at getting negative plays. That usually doesn't work that way. So if you get Florida State in 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 4s, you got a pretty good chance. And that's where this comes in. I know you're a Miami fan, so this is ridiculous. Like Restrepo and Horton and all those guys are good, but on third down, 3rd and medium is the money maker in the NFL. 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 6, stuff like that. It's the same in college. Here's what Ward has done on third downs. This is where Florida State usually eats, but not against Ward. He is just killing it. He's 14 to 17, 82.4%, 215 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks, 12 first downs. That's like stats in a little league, rec league kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like he's even at 3rd and long, he's around 50% or so that he converts. He's as good a third down quarterback as college football has seen in the modern era. So Florida State sucks at it, and he's the best I remember. That's not going to bode well for the Noles.
Yeah, Miami's the #1 third down team in the country, and
right.
like you mentioned, it's not only third and medium. At this point, even if it's third and 15,
it's insane.
They had against Louisville, they had a 3rd and 17 that Ward picked up with his legs, and that stuff has been kind of ordinary for Miami this year. But I want to talk about some critical matchups when we come back. And honestly, I don't want any Locked On Canes or Locked On Seminoles viewers to think that I'm getting cocky about this one, because I do believe in the rivalry X factors. Because I've watched probably, close to I'm 40 years old. I've watched close to 40 Miami versus Florida State games over the years, and you expect the unexpected a lot of times in this rivalry. So friends, you want to keep it locked right here. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your next rough day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and then you'll feel at your best tomorrow. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Guys, this works. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at checkout for 15% off. Thank you so much for making this epic Locked On crossover your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Got Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles, Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, talking about this matchup this weekend. So, Brian, something that I look at, statistical trends, Florida State's defense, of course, much better than that offense. 38th in the country against the pass. I saw Fentrell Cypress had a really good game against Duke, and Florida State limited Duke's total offense, limited their passing game. So I'm definitely looking at that matchup when Miami throws, and Miami loves to throw. Cam Ward loves to find his weapons. He's been over 300 yards every game. So I wonder if Florida State can maybe create some turnovers, some takeaways in the passing game, if they can frustrate Miami's passing offense a little bit. So that's probably the biggest matchup that I look at from a Miami side. What are you looking at matchup-wise in this game?
Well, I will piggyback off that and just be a little more specific. There's two that I'm curious. Xavier Restrepo this year is not good. He's elite. 39 catches, 686, 17.6, and 6 touchdowns. He's a first-team All-American in my book right now. But at the same time, you still have multiple other guys. And by the way, hats off to Isaiah Horton, who's really stepped up. You got the other two guys behind him. We got 24 catches, but Isaiah's got 34, 412, 12.1 and 4 scores. So they spread it around. Who's going to guard X, especially when you're subbing? Not many nickel corners at the pro level are going to want to handle X. I'm concerned about that for Florida State, even though they got talent. And then Florida State is going to go up against a team that uses H-backs and tight ends very well. Lofton is a guy that not many people know about unless you follow Miami. He's a freshman that's a good football player. He might be a guy, especially like red zone, third downs or something, to get a big play. And of course, Elijah is, good for him that he's healthy. He's having a nice year. I'm not real confident with the Noles in coverage at linebacker, but they like to play man. So you're going to live and die with it. Kind of like Miami had, I'm sure we'll get to it in a second, but like Miami has Daryl Porter. We never hear about Daryl Porter because why would you throw at him? The other spot's not very good. Florida State's two corners aren't good, so you throw it in the middle of the field a little more, force the safeties to make plays. They got two guys that will at least go to the NFL draft. I think Azariah will play in the NFL for a while. He's a 6'2" corner. He's really good. Miami's going to avoid him for the most part. Make the nickel, make the linebackers cover, look for more screens from Miami. Florida State gets confused on things once in a while, and they're mixing in younger guys at linebacker, which is good long-term, but against Miami's complex offense, that doesn't give me warm and fuzzies.
All right, so here's a matchup I want to pick your brain on, because again, like obviously Florida State's offense has been pretty tragic to start the year. Miami's defense has had their struggles, but your take on what you think Miami's pass rush can accomplish in this game, because no matter which or combination of quarterbacks Miami goes up against, Brock or Luke, lack of experience there. Brock, the second-year redshirt freshman, Luke being the even less experienced guy. I mentioned Simeon Barrow has been playing great, rushing the passer from the interior. Ruben Bain has been back playing well. Tyler Barron had a great start to the year. How's Florida State's offensive line been, Brian, in recent weeks? And do you think they can provide some protection?
No. They are atrocious in pass protection. Let me give you 2 examples. They got into the red zone on the very first drive against Duke after the big play. And the following, I'm saying in full honesty, I have watched football since the early 1980s. This is the worst offensive line play I've ever seen. They had 3 guys go block 1. 3. What are we doing? Both guards in the center went out to block the same guy. Both defensive tackles went into the backfield. Neither one was blocked. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And both the guards were moved to that spot 1 or 2 weeks ago, and the other one moved from tackle and Jalen Early. Andre Otto, who's not ready, is at the other spot. They're going to get eaten alive, is my straight up opinion. The center, Maurice Smith, is a good player. Yeah. But he's just dealt a difficult hand because the guard play's been so bad. They'll rotate TJ Ferguson in a little bit. The only thing you need to watch, I don't care which team you root for, what you're in, just watch the A gaps. If they're not doing well, and I don't expect them to, I expect a lot of 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11s or worse, because Florida State's not going to be able to block them up front. They get confused a lot and they have problems. Duke's pretty well coached, but they were running really generic stunts and not one of them getting home both. What do you think Miami's going to do with that talent difference between the level of Duke and Miami? Miami could have 6 to 8 sacks, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things that I don't necessarily see it playing out this way, and I'll talk about why. I think Florida State can maybe keep this game closer than a lot of people think, but if Miami does have an opportunity to run up the score, I think this might be the week where they'd be willing to do it, because Cristobal remembers when Florida State came into Hard Rock Stadium 2 years ago and beat Miami 45-3 and showed absolutely no mercy in that game. So if given the opportunity to flip that, Cristobal will take that opportunity. But it's like, but something else, like when I've watched Florida State this year, Brian, and obviously there's a lot of issues when you're 1-6. Like that 1-6 is not a coincidence. At the same time, though, there's times when I feel like they're getting a little bit of momentum, and then I see catastrophic mistakes. I see a bad snap over a quarterback's head that derails a promising drive. I see an untimely interception or a fumble, like just like knuckleheaded plays that make it look worse than it probably really is. So is there any feeling in Tallahassee that some of that's fixable and that they may be able to maybe put together their best game this weekend?
I mean, a lot of that stuff is just mental. Like 2 games ago, Maurice, I mean, he's a 6th-year senior. He played at Miami Central, if I remember right. How do you explain that? You know what I mean? It's just bizarre. And then, like I said a minute ago, they literally had 3 guys blocking a linebacker while both defensive tackles went into the backfield. Oof. I mean, I know Florida State's coaching is not exactly at the top of the board. I'm being very kind. I expect several guys to get canned after this year. But this is partially just players self-imploding. So the only fix is reps. And they're going to get trial by fire this next Saturday. Yeah. Hard Rock will be loud, which it's usually not, but it will be loud because this will be the game where Miami fans show up. They've been waiting for this for a long time. And, I get it. They're going to want to see Miami up 21-0 after the first quarter, and they might. So I think the only thing that Florida State can fix is to really just continue to improve the run game, because they're not going to be able to pass protect against Miami. Pass protection takes months to get going in any chemistry. Run game's a little bit easier. They do have very talented running backs. Florida State is not shy on running back talent. So I think that's their key. And then they need to try to get those tight ends, those young tight ends involved, some quick outs and different things just to get athletes the ball. But I don't think there's much chance of improvement against Miami overall.
You mentioned, and I agree with you, there's probably going to be a lot of turnover on the assistant coaching staff. Is there any scenario where Norvell's seat could get hot, or has he built up too much equity, and is the buyout, quite frankly, too high? Is it just a matter of they're going to give him an opportunity to make changes and fix it?
I think your last point is the key. I don't know the number exact, but I believe it's over 60 million. It's just not happening.
Yeah, no.
It's just not realistic. The problem I have with that is they may need not to wait after 20. They might want to wait after 20. It's just a financial deal.
Yeah.
And it's recruiting. I mean, you're going to put yourself in such a bad spot. Like, this is a lose-lose. Mike seems like a pretty nice guy, pretty loyal guy.
I've met him before. Yeah.
And that's good. But I've always said this: show me a head coach that's very loyal to his assistants, and I'll show you a head coach that's soon to be fired. There's always somebody that needs to go because it's very, very complex. He's got to can several guys, or else he will be on the hot seat the next year, because fans, like on my pod, go in the comments section on YouTube. It is nonstop. Fire everybody. And it only takes one or two of the people that write 7-figure checks to feel that way, and then you got a problem. So Florida State is not rolling in money right now, so they're in a really awkward spot.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we'll give our predictions when we come back. Hurricanes, by the way, I was checking this on FanDuel. We'll talk more about that. But Miami favored by 19.5 points. That was the opening number, 19.5. Too low. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode. Locked On Crossover. We got Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. Keep it locked right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I know you're keeping it locked to Gametime. This is the only ticket app that we use. You're getting the best prices, and those prices tend to go down the closer you get to the start of the event. Like, I'm looking at Miami, Florida State tickets. For those, whether you're a Miami fan or a Florida State fan, you want to go to Hard Rock Stadium. I'm looking at $98 tickets right now. And a few days ago, they were starting at $108. So down to $98. You want to take advantage of these great deals and great features at Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Guys, I love the all-in pricing feature. They show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Gametime has the lowest price guarantee, or they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and we'll give you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you so much for making this Locked On Crossover your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does an awesome job taking you through all the big games and big storylines, and college football has been crazy so far this year. So Spencer does a great job navigating all that chaos. Brian Smith, before we give our game predictions for Florida State at Miami this Saturday, 7 p.m., can you give me a possible recruiting nugget here? Because I know there's going to be a lot of recruits at the game, hosted by Miami, watching Miami and Florida State. One of those recruits who's going to be in the building is 5-star defensive back DJ Pickett, he's been committed since the summer to LSU. Miami, if he's a legacy, Miami would love to flip him from LSU. Do you think there's any opening there? Or is DJ, I know he's got a great relationship with Corey Raymond at LSU. Does he seem pretty locked in, or could there be an opening?
I always say follow the visits. I was curious if he was going to go to this game. If DJ follows through and actually does it, I mean, just for the sake of the record, I think Miami's right there. I know he's committed to LSU, but I've known DJ since he's in 8th grade. Good guy, always happy to do interviews and stuff when you get a chance to be in front of him and all that. But if you're still taking visits and you're in the middle of your senior year, you're not committed. That's how I look at it. If I'm a Miami fan, I look at it like this is a legitimate chance. And let's be honest, what's the one spot where Miami needs help more than any other?
Defensive back.
I mean, DJ would probably be used in multiple ways. For those of you who don't know anything about him, it doesn't matter. This is all you need to know. He's the rarest defensive back I have ever scouted. He's 6'4", and he can play corner.
Yeah.
It's just astronomically insane how physically gifted he is. And he's motivated too. Real quiet guy. Kind of reminds me of Jeremiah Smith in that regard. He's just real quiet, but goes about his business by taking the ball away from you. If he goes to receiver, he scores. He's a free safety. He does whatever he wants. It's physical, athletic, and smart. He will be a first-day draft pick one day.
All right, so I'm going to go on record with my prediction, and we don't usually do these this early in the week, so I'm going to try to stick with this for the next 5 days. But I not only feel like Florida State is going to play, relatively speaking, their best game of the season, because I think they'll be up for the rivalry, but I also don't think they can stop Miami's offense. Nobody can, quite frankly. At least certainly nobody in the ACC can. So I'm going to go Miami's going to score a lot. I'm going to go Miami 45, but I don't know. I'm worried about Miami's D. I hope they prove me wrong, but I think Miami's going to give up 25, score 45. They'll cover that spread by a half a point. I'm going Miami 45, Florida State 25, Miami by 20. What do you think, Brian?
45-10. I think it'll be just lopsided. You got to remember, Florida State's throwing out a freshman quarterback and a redshirt freshman quarterback. What are the other? Yeah. Maybe both. Yeah. I think that in the first half, Florida State are lucky to have 100 yards of offense. I just don't think they'll be able to block them. If you watched any of the Texas game, I mean, Texas got some really good offensive linemen, but Georgia was on fire. I don't care who you got a quarterback. If you got, what would they have, like 7 sacks? Against Texas, so on. That's unbelievable, by the way. Hats off to Georgia. But I expect something similar. I just don't think they'll be able to block them. And any third down, like Florida State might finish the game 1 out of 12 on third downs, something like that. Wow. I think they will be abysmal, and they will lose field position all night long, and it'll be ugly.
Wow. All right. Well, I like your prediction actually better than mine.
I'm sure you do. Sure
He is Brian Smith, Locked On Seminoles. He's also one of our great recruiting experts here, our top recruiting guy here on the Locked On Network. Make sure you follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Make sure you follow us at Locked On Canes, at Alex Donno. And thank you guys so much, Locked On Seminoles listeners and Locked On Canes listeners, for making this crossover your first listen and your first watch today. Brian, best of luck to you, sir, and have a great week of shows leading up to this rivalry clash.
I thank you very much, sir. You do the same.
We'll talk to everyone next time on another episode right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.